If you were asked to name a role-playing video game, which title would you spit out first? Maybe your mind goes toward all-timers like Skyrim or Fallout, games which sold millions of copies and remain replayable today. Well, if you call any Bethesda game playable, or you might steer toward a childhood favorite like a Pokemon installment or Harvest Moon, perhaps even a more recent release like Baldur's Gate 3 or that new Dragon Age game featuring the bald bitch. In any case, there's a whole world of RPGs to explore, and it's hard to narrow these games into a homogeneous clump. The term RPG is incredibly broad, so much so that you can find a title that incorporates the token elements in almost any style. But the RPG origins can sometimes bleed into the background, especially with more quote-unquote cozy games. I think we should dig them back out of their musty, dusty crypt and take them for a test drive. Many players, including myself 90% of the time, will enter a character creator and start working on some sort of version of themselves, whether it be an exact replica or a fantasy-style recreation or an idealistic portrait. I love a self-insert more than anything, and I am a huge advocate for sticking yourself into everything you can. However, if you've ever spent 4 hours rolling dice with your best friends during a tabletop RPG session, you probably see the process of creating a character through a different light. Building a completely new personality is something that plenty of people do in larger, more story-rich video games. But Skyrim isn't the only place you can put your OC. You can shove your purple-haired elven warrior into Stardew Valley, or Fields of Mystria, or hell, even Wizard 101. Today, I'm going to attempt to prove it, and also show off a few resources to enrich your experiences. Let's hop in. First, just in case you have 4,000 hours in Elden Ring and you're about to write me a historical manifesto about how Terraria isn't a real RPG, let's define a CRPG. The most common universal definition of an RPG is a game where a player controls a character or several characters who will undergo development, whether personal, skills-based, or both. Completing or beating a game is usually done via quests, combat, and interactions with NPCs. The character is often created fully by the player, starting with a blank slate, but there are also cases where the outline of the character is created for you. These games also tend to have rich, fleshed out worlds that your choices impact. RPGs are divided into two main gameplay styles: turn-based, where the player is given time to plan out and strategize their moves, and action-based, where reactions must happen in real time. You've probably experienced turn-based combat in Pokemon or BG3, whereas Stardew and Fallout are action-based. That's a very bare-bones explanation of what an RPG can truly entail, but it helps us get a better understanding of the perimeters. Things like set skill points are sometimes used in games that more wholly reference classic TTRPGs, but they don't have to be present for a game to be considered an RPG. Today, I'm going to be using Stardew Valley as my main reference point, but I'll get into how to apply this all to more nebulous examples later. When we look at Stardew, we can match plenty of attributes to those more critically recognized RPGs. We have a skill leveling system, including a subclass function called professions in this case. Skill leveling is done through an invisible experience mechanic where each action done awards XP to bring you closer to your next milestone. According to the Stardew Wiki, different actions give different amounts. Chopping down a whole tree gives you 14 XP to the foraging skill, while 7 XP is granted for harvesting ginger for some reason. As you level up, you can pick your professions, which add different buffs based on your selection. You know that, I know that, but I'm being thorough, okay? With each level you gain, your proficiency with that skill increases, which lowers the amount of energy expended when you use the related tool. So, as the game goes on, your skills develop. Easy peasy. You also have various goals to complete throughout the world, both in the form of side quests and the main quest of fixing up or demolishing the community center. You have the power in your hands to wrestle the town back from Joja's clutches or let the corporation take over, thus influencing the town's future. You also have sway in the personal lives of NPCs and how their storylines play out, such as with Leah's artistic choices and her cutscenes. What your character does and says and how their actions affect the valley personality is your choice, but you don't always have to play what you would do. Although we have a lot less customization options in comparison to more character creation focused games, we still have a fair amount of wiggle room in building a personality. We just have to rely on imagination a little bit more. Grab the wheel of the car, jerk it to the side, and step on the gas. This is your playthrough, damn it, and you can make it whatever you want. Let's start by actually creating a character. If you're experienced in OC creation, you probably don't need to watch this part, but I will be providing some tools if you'd like to check them out. Don't take any of this too seriously or I'll hit you square in the jaw with a brick. In a lot of TTRPGs, players use a physical character sheet to record their character's info and features. Obviously, character sheets are used for combat and checks, so we don't need all of that, but we can still use the format. I put together a few different types of character sheets, one specifically for Stardew and one that can be adapted to fit other games with different mechanics. Also, some printer-friendly versions because I don't like wasting ink. The one I've put together here can either be loaded into a program like Photoshop or Photopea to type on, or you can just download it to your computer. At the very top here, there's a space for a portrait and a name, which I highly recommend doing first to map out an idea of what you want your character to look like. If you're a modder, you can use this portrait as a reference to find cosmetic mods. More on that later. Jazzy Bee has an incredible portrait maker, Picrew style thing that's really easy and fun to use. I've linked that down below. There aren't too many fantasy skin tones, but you can also just doodle your character if you want. The first page has very basic information, such as features and built-in game choices. For the mock-up character I threw together here, Ariadne, I wanted her to be a cave explorer type. I went with the wilderness farm to match that aesthetic, and I paired her with Emily since they have similar interests in crystal collecting. I wrote up a quick backstory for her, picking the Gatoro Empire as her birthplace, but that's more or less because I didn't want to come up with a new area. I also allied her with Pierre, and there's a section right here to explain why your character would choose that path. Maybe your character would go for Joja because they grew up in a more noble, rich, wealthy area and don't feel the presence of corporations quite as much. Or maybe your character would choose Pierre because they find him hot, if you're a fucking sadist. You can choose to continue on and do the second page, but it's not totally necessary if you just want to wing it and have some fun, but if you want more in-depth information, we can move on. Page 2 has some prompts for you to further develop your little guy. Since Stardew sort of has only two main paths, I wrote up some aspirations, sort of like personal quests to assign to your character. You can make your own fun here, but these are a few examples. Play around with it, come up with something unique to your character if you want. Most of the ones I listed here are a bit on the hard side, but you could also have your character's goal be something as simple as completing a flower garden or getting all the hidden statues. There's also a list of some relevant traits you can check off if you so choose, and a write-in space to further detail personality. These are here to reference when you make in-game decisions if you want them to be true to form for your character, but they're wholly unnecessary. If you want to add some chance to your sheet, all of the checkmark choices like farm type, romance, aspiration, that kind of shit can be rolled for with either a D8 or a D12. All of this is very customizable and bare bones, but now you have a reference for gameplay. Your creation doesn't have to live in the Stardew canon, but they totally can. You could go for a Zuzu City native, a Calico Desert transplant, even another freaky Mr. Key style being. Since physical customization is fairly limited in vanilla Stardew, I highly recommend checking out some appearance mods. I download mods through Vortex since it's easiest for me. You can just drag and drop them and it makes the toggling easier. For some saves, I also have the Wayback Pelican Town mod on to make things look a bit more medieval. Do you want your character to have horns, elf ears, bright pink skin? There's mods for all of that. If you want to go the appearance mods route, the first thing you're going to want to do is download Fashion Sense and then get some content packs. Every single mod I've shown in this video will be linked down below in the big old document, so don't worry about that. However, I can firmly say that role-playing without mods is totally doable. You're just a bit more confined with the visuals. What you put your gold into, how you interact with the townsfolk, and where your priorities lie can all be influenced by the personality you've put together. Maybe your character would be inclined to make their farm animal-based, since they feel that Pelican Town's natural fauna is declining. Maybe they'd grow lots of tea leaves and build up their farm to be a town cafe. Filling in the blanks that the story leaves up to interpretation might not be everyone's thing, but exercising your creative muscles while you plant your crops is never a waste of time. I've been playing a co-op farm with a few of my friends, and we've all come up with our own character dynamics and backstories to fuck around with when we log on, which is what initially inspired me to put this bullshit together. It's completely low pressure and malleable, and sometimes that's exactly what you need, especially if you're just getting into the whole role-playing thing. Ariadne here is about to have a tumultuous relationship with Emily, where they feed off of each other's mania until the parrot kills and eats them both. So that character sheet I showed you is very Stardew specific. It's a bit more difficult to make a sheet that can shift purposes for any game that also features unique mechanics, so this one is much more blank. It has a lot of the basic character information from the Stardew sheet, but I left plenty of spots empty to add more specialized notes. For example, if you wanted to make an OC for a Pokemon X playthrough, you could write in your team's theme and any naming conventions you wanted to follow. Or if you're playing The Sims, you could put down a list of townies to marry and subsequently divorce. It's more of a template for you to fill out on your own, but getting creative with it is the main shtick. Even games that aren't technically RPGs can be played in the style of one if you're committed enough to the bit, which I always am. Resetting your Animal Crossing island? Great, your resident rep just flew in from the United States to go into witness protection. If you're low on ideas, plenty of awesome prompt generators are available online. You can be as silly or intense as you'd like to be. If that still doesn't seem too easy to jump into, I also put together a quiz that will give you a starter prompt, because I had a sick itch to make a quiz for this shitty video too. It's not like my Animal Crossing quiz, don't worry, it takes like 5 minutes and you could hand your phone to a toddler and let them spit up on it and they'd still be able to complete it. If you're no fun and a bit lame, you might be asking why anyone would do any of this. These cozy RPGs are plenty of fun on their own, solo or co-op, and there's no reason to build up a storyline. Most games come with a path for you to walk. If that's the intention, for you to play it as it was meant to be played, why spend time creating a character that can't actually influence all that much? What is the benefit to putting time and effort and mental energy into role-playing in your own head like a 12-year-old on DeviantArt? My answer is this: if it's fun, you should do it. If it's not fun, it's not for you. Being silly and enjoying yourself isn't something that should be seen as worthless or useless, and this is one of a billion ways to integrate that into your day. However, you also don't need a reason to do anything really. You can do whatever you want forever. And if what you want is to make a Fields of Mystery a Mary Sue, you fucking can. So do it. Why not, man?